Susan Leu with Leu Real Estate out of Dorado Hills. And in this video today, we're going to talk about non-contingent offers. So we'll first talk about what is a contingency in a real estate transaction. So simply put, a contingency is a safeguard for the buyer if they decide to cancel the transaction once they're in escrow to make sure they get their deposit back. So we'll talk about why a buyer would write a non-contingent offer and what the three main contingencies are. So the three main contingencies are your investigation, your appraisal, and your loan. So those are the three main contingencies in a real estate transaction. So when a buyer decides to write a non-contingent offer, they're basically waiving their right up front to be able to cancel the transaction once they're in escrow. There is one exception to that, which we will talk about a little bit later. So the three main contingencies, we'll go over those in detail. So the investigation contingency. So what the investigation contingency is, it's typically your inspections, your home inspection, your pest inspection, maybe a roof, an HVAC, a pool inspection if that's valid. If you're on rural property, it might be a septic. But it also could be looking at your HOA docs. Let's say you're buying in a community where there's a homeowners association. And so you want to make sure, that they've got their financials in order. So that might be another investigation. So if you've waived your contingency and you're buying in an HOA, for example, and you find out, geez, they've been really irresponsible with their money, then you've waived your right to cancel over that. So without losing your deposit, which will be the theme throughout this video. So you want to make sure if you're going to waive them that you're going to be okay with whatever you might find in your investigations. It doesn't mean you've waived your right to do them. You still can do inspections. You can look at HOA docs. You just can't cancel because of something you find in there and just automatically get your deposit back. So the next one would be your appraisal contingency. And if you're paying cash, then you may not get an appraisal. But if you're paying cash and you discover you overpaid for the house, you can't cancel over that without losing your deposit. And if you're getting a loan, then your lender's going to do an appraisal. And so you want to be certain what you offered is what you really believe the home is going to appraise for. And your agent can help you determine that. But we never know what the appraiser is going to come in with. So let's use an example of you wrote a non-contingent offer. You waived the appraisal contingency up front. You wrote it for $300,000 and it appraised for $290,000. You're going to need to make up that $10,000 difference if you're going to stay in the transaction without risking your deposit. So you'll have to bring $10,000 more to the table. You just need to keep that in mind. And the last one would be your loan contingency. If you have a loan and for whatever reason your loan falls through, and it does happen, could be that you decided to go use credit and buy a car, or you lost your job at the last minute, then you've waived your right to cancel the transaction over not being able to get your loan. So those are all really important things that you need to think about. And it's a good thing to discuss with your real estate professional. They can explain to you all the risks for doing that and how that might look if you need to cancel. There is one exception, as I mentioned earlier. So in California, on properties that are considered 1 to 4 family, the seller is required to provide, in most cases, what's called a transfer disclosure statement, or we call it the TDS. And the TDS provides a lot of information from the seller to the buyer about the property. It'll include things like, are all the appliances working? Are there shared fences? Are there any claims against the property? Things like that. So that is one way a non-contingent offer can get canceled, is if after the seller provides the TDS to the buyer has 5 days to cancel, or if the seller has to modify the TDS, those same 5 days apply. However, in a really competitive market where non-contingent offers are being written, the listing agent is providing that TDS up front. And so you've looked at it before you wrote your offer. So you want to be aware of that. But it is a statutory way to be able to cancel. However, you need to be mindful of when you first saw the TDS. So that would be the only way you could do that. For a seller, thinking about a non-contingent offer, if it's an all-cash offer, then, you want to make sure that the buyer has the funds. So you're going to ask for proof of funds at the time the offer is delivered to you or before you accept it. And then, as I said earlier, in a non-contingent offer, a buyer may have a statutory right to cancel based on the TDS. So you want to work with your listing agent to make sure that that is either delivered and looked at and acknowledged prior to accepting the offer, or you want to get it to the buyer shortly after so that your property is not held up a long time off the market. And then the other thing I want sellers to think about is just because a buyer with a non-contingent offer cancels, it's not just an automatic that you get the deposit. There are ways the buyer can dispute it, hold your property off the market during that time. So you'll want to weigh all of that for the situation and decide how much you want to fight for keeping that deposit versus I just want to get my property back on the market, so let's just release it. And how long was it off the market, etc. The other thing to think about is, sort of forcing the buyer to go through with it can cause some feelings after close of escrow. They could be angry and disgruntled. They could make some claims, some lawsuits. Even if they're baseless, you still have to spend your time fighting them. So those are just all things to consider when you're working with a non-contingent offer. So those are my thoughts on that. And if you have any questions about non-contingent offers, I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm going to put my contact information in the comment section. So feel free to get a hold of me. And thanks so much for listening and have a great day.